I was becoming more aware that I was sort of like ending every day by feeling bad about not getting enough things done. And at some point I sort of refused to, sort of go on in that sort of state. Like that can't be how this is or how life goes.
Happy Halloween, everybody! I hope you have some fun plans for the holiday, and at the very least, that you plan on eating your favorite candy. Mine is Butterfinger, if you didn't know. And I'm personally not sure exactly what I'm doing yet, but it better involve giving out candy, because that is my favorite thing to do. I love seeing all the costumes. I'm sure it's going to involve some sort of costume of my own. Stay tuned to Instagram for that. Today, we have an exciting guest with a great name, Emily Achler. Emily Achler, she's the CEO and co-founder of the book tracking app, Italic Type, and she joins me today to discuss our obsession with optimization, particularly in the United States. What is that? Yeah, you know it. The constant pressure to do more and always be quote unquote productive. We get into some really interesting territory and recommendations, so relax and enjoy this episode, but keep a pen handy or your notes app open. You're going to want to take a few, I'm sure. I'm Emily Drake, and this is Who's Missing. We're here to talk about the culture of optimization, which feels like, in order to optimize, you sort of have to, working toward a goal, no off days.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to know what you're optimizing for. Also,
yeah.
You have to, it sort of also assumes that you've identified that.
Right. So I happen to know that you've just gotten back from some time away. Can you tell me about why you decided to do what you did and what it was like and what it's like to come back?
So I did just get back from taking 10 days off of work, which to some, and probably to a lot of other entrepreneurs out there, is a very radical idea. It's funny to put it in terms of talk about why you did what you did. It's a really, big thing, but it sort of is. So yes, I did take 10 days off over my birthday and over Labor Day. It was a thorough unplugging. I didn't check my email, didn't worry about, responding to other things. And I don't feel bad about it. It's also taken me years to kind of get to that place. But in the sort of course of my own entrepreneurial journey, became really interested in this idea of time and how we spend it and what we do with it and who gets to say. It's become increasingly important to me to feel really ownership over my time. I get to decide how I spend it. And sometimes, and it's necessary to spend that in this sort of unplugged, not working space.
Mm-hmm. Why do we feel bad about it? About stepping away from anything, really? But why do we feel bad about taking 10 days or taking a day?
Well, I think that it's so tied up in kind of external and societal pressure around what your time is for. And, if your time is for maximizing, billable hours, then it is not a good thing to take a day off or take some time off. Mm-hmm. For me, also I was becoming more aware that I was sort of ending every day by feeling bad about not getting enough things done. And at some point I sort of refused to, sort of go on in that sort of state. That can't be how this is or how life goes. The guilt and the comparisons and the I'm not doing enough is all feels so real. But I think separating those feelings from like what is actually going on is sort of the hard work that's required. It does feel bad.
We are grateful to have you as a guest on the podcast, but also on this topic because listeners now have the good fortune of getting access to a veritable bibliography of pre-screened, preordained content on this topic that is long form, that is potentially, not clicking through for a solution to optimize, but to instead invite people to think about why. And for what do you want to optimize your life? So tell us a little bit about your own journey with how you've made the decisions to focus where you're focusing at this stage in your entrepreneurship journey, in your journey as a woman, a partner, a friend.
As I mentioned, I became really interested in this idea around productivity, optimization. Why do we feel bad every day? I started reading some books on the topic. I have found several that I go back to as touchstones that I would make everyone read if I could. I have also found that it's been necessary to revisit like some of these ideas continuously because it is very easy to feel all of that like external pressure and distraction without sort of having some of these, other what I think are more true ideas sort of front and center in your face.
I'm writing down the more true ideas. Can you say more about that? And before you do, just give you some time to think about what it means to be more true. Because you are a CEO, you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder of a website, of a community called Italic Type. You're on this mission to share the joy of reading with others, and I'll let you say exactly what it is from your own mouth. But the reason I think talking to you about this is so compelling is, like you said, there's a lot out there. So if we can listen to Emily Achler tell us the truth, what does it mean to locate something that's more true? You've read so much, and I count on you for recommendations and guidance in that way, but also for thoughtful commentary. How'd you land there?
Thanks for teeing up that great introduction about Italic Type. That is the company that I founded. Italic Type is the simplest app to track your books and share the joy of reading with friends. Our aim is to make reading feel more joyful, meaningful, connected, so that people draw more value from the books that they read. So one of the things that we say is like getting more value out of the books that you read as opposed to just getting through more books. We want to maximize the internal rewards that people get from reading to make it this sort of, again, more joyful, ongoing, deeper, sort of connected experience. That's the purpose of Italic Type, and it was in part inspired by this book club that I started in Chicago about 10 years ago. And from this book club came to see that there were these really incredible benefits that came from connecting people over shared interests and books. So that's what I've spent the last few years developing. It is admittedly a different path than sort of a traditional kind of linear career progression. I'd say it's been risky, difficult, and a bit against the grain. And so I've had to, I think, do more work to figure out kind of like my purpose, why I'm doing what I'm doing, not feel the sort of like loss aversion or kind of external comparison from other people being more successful or making more money, really making careful decisions, I guess, about the value of like how I'm spending my time. Being an entrepreneur, specifically working on Italic Type as well, has sort of kind of cross-pollinated some of these ideas around like where the pitfalls and opportunities lie within this like topic of productivity and optimization. And I'd say another aspect of why I think this is a topic that is like so resonant for so many people, and it just seems like people are feeling worse and worse about like what's not getting done, is, we have this attention economy that has just a gajillion dollars like worth of support behind it, whose job it is to distract you and interrupt you from what you want. That's the purpose. And we're talking in the beginning about, times we've got by ads and different kinds of things. It's real, it works. All of that stuff is in the way. They want to be in the way of like you doing what you're trying to do. That just makes it all even harder to know what you're trying to do, have the focus to complete that, block out everything else that is really trying really hard to get after your attention. We're not always going to be great at doing that. We have to be kind to ourselves and like understand that there are forces arrayed against us. But I think it's important to be mindful of like whose agenda, like who's in control, who benefits you spending your time like in X way or in Y way.
So there's this natural desire you have, I think. And I know you. I'm a member of the book club, you guys. I am very, very fortunate. I don't think it's an exclusive club at all. It's quite inclusive. And, Emily and I met in the pandemic at a Galentine's Day party. I like to tell people how I've met people because, you meet someone anywhere who changes your life. I just want to underscore everything you said has this footnote of like, and I've also read a lot about this stuff. So I want to come back to this question about things being true, distilling with all of that awareness of like, look, Emily, have taken the time to kind of slow down, make the time to consider and be intentional about what is the value of any of this. Do you have, as you emerge from, and you're still immersed in it, I know, but emerge from like this season of exploration about optimization with truths that you can share with us?
They come from books. And I know. So on brand. So one book that I think is excellent on this topic is called 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman. And there's, I think, a lot of really excellent and true/more true ideas that are happening in that book. One is the quantifiable time that we have here. So 4,000 weeks is 80 years. So that's assuming, you live 80 years. The number that you have is 4,000 weeks. Time is finite. It's the most finite resource that we have. It is true that you can't ever like do more than one thing. You can't be more than one place or do more than one thing like within 1 hour's, unit of time. Therefore, it's about making choices and embracing your ability and like ownership over the choices that you make with what you're going to do with this time that is limited. He has this great idea called JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. I sort of think of that idea and concept all the time. When I'm making a choice to do, one thing over another, part of why it's hard is that like, I might really want to do that thing that I'm saying no to, or like wish that I could, but it's okay. Like I can't, and that's okay too. And it actually also has the effect of making the thing that you do choose more valuable. And you kind of like accurately assess that value.
Yeah. We have to talk about joy now. I haven't been tallying it, but you've said it a number of times. And I think when we think about our optimization and obsession with it, here's what comes up for me when both of those words. Discipline. effort results with delay, something in the future. And when I think about joy, I felt a little bit of it when you were talking about what you do, because I was getting a little buzz, like a dopamine hit. It was great because I think italic type is really special. But let's talk about joy. Like if we can measure our time in billable hours, and we can measure our energy perhaps in like fatigue and exhaustion, how do we get in touch with and then like optimize for joy? Like that feels hard to do that. It feels audacious to do that. It shouldn't feel that way, I suppose, but what do you make of that? It's a feeling. How do we talk about it? How do we make that more a part of the popular thought, you know?
Yeah. So one of the things that I associate with like optimization is this idea of not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
We have to apply effort to something because like we're not good enough in some way.
Yeah.
Not that we shouldn't have goals, not that we shouldn't strive for self-improvement, but like there's this very tricky area for me, and I'm going to venture to say probably all humans, where there's a tension between self-acceptance and optimization and the like what isn't good enough sort of piece of what's going on. And to always be in that not good enough state is, I think, you know, one of the biggest joy blockers there is.
Yeah.
Nothing quite blocks joy like, you know, not being whatever enough, rich enough, thin enough, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That is why that's a feeling that's like so hard to connect with sometimes. And I think really trying to find ways to like mine the joy out of the progress of like what is happening now, and to set yourself up to be able to feel good. Kind of going back to me realizing that I was ending every day feeling like really bad, like I hadn't done enough, because I would write out these to-do lists of like 25 things that there's literally a 0% chance I'm going to be able to complete in a day.
Mm-hmm.
I would do like one or two things. I'd be like, oh my God, why am I doing so little? But that's like my own misperception of time and like the time that things take also. And so one of the kind of little tactical thing, but kind of setting myself up to experience more joy, is making my to-do list one or two things. Like if I do these one or two things today, I know I'm going to end the day feeling good. Or like this is the one thing that has to happen for me to like be, you know, 6:30 and saying this was a good day. Let yourself experience more good enough kind of feelings.
Yeah. It's occurring to me that, you know, you brought up at the front end comparison. And I don't know who said it, but it's another cliche or saying, and one line things are popular because they're true. Comparison is the thief of joy, right? You mentioned you chose this path. And it's like, of course, in that choice, this path of, you know, I think your words were like, not making a lot of money. Like, number one, right? In favor of something else. So there was a choice there. Can you say what you chose instead?
What I chose instead follows a particular path that as I look back, I can kind of see how the dots connect, but I don't know if I realized it at the time.
Yeah.
But I have always been someone, even as like a very young person, who felt really called to action and animated about all of the problems, you know, that like are going on that I see. Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, my senior year, I actually got voted most likely to organize a protest. Yes. Things need to change, and they're not changing fast enough. Most of the jobs that I've had since college have been related to, you know, working on like big, systemic, complicated ideas to make the world a better place, climate change and like clean tech. I worked on gun control and gun violence prevention for a while. These are big Rubik's Cube-esque type of issues. And so I've always felt like what you're doing with time ought to play a role in impacting positive changes and better quality of life for as many people as possible, because that's like the society that I want to live in. And I think I also have a problem with authority sometimes too, of being told, well, this is the way things are, and this is the way it's always been. I just know that that's not true. And I know that we can use our imaginations to think of, different futures and possibilities that are better. I think what I chose was this idea of continuing to protest and continuing to fight back against technology forces that are not improving, human quality of life. In many, many ways and cases, it is making it worse. Mm-hmm. What if we could use technology not to distract ourselves into oblivion? I mean, I think the platforms literally, mentally and physically make people feel bad. What if we weren't using all of this money and technology and brain power to make us buy whatever on Instagram, but we, use it for good? And in the case of reading and readers, for example, help people do more of what they want to be spending their time doing.
This week's Spotlight is on a company that we've actually spotlit before, back in our very first episode, because it's so wonderful. Italic Type is the name of the app. It's the simplest reading app to track your books. And for me, more importantly, share the joy of reading with friends. I love community. No ads, no distractions, and you can join for free. To learn more, visit italictype.com and enjoy. Now, back to the show. Optimizing for change, optimizing for sustainability. These are values that you are anchored in, and you will step away for 10 days. And I would love to hear what came out of that for you so that you can keep going, right? Optimizing for durability, for energy, it's the hard that you're choosing. And making a lot of money, to be clear, right? If people are listening and they're like, look, yeah, I am up at 4, let's just do the cliche, right? I'm up at 4, I get a workout in, I go to the office, I'm in back-to-back meetings. Great. Here's the question that Emily and I have for you, the Emilys. How do you feel at the end of the day? If you feel damn, okay, right? And I'm ready to do it again tomorrow. I'm going to need some sleep, possibly a glass of wine, and to plan a trip because I can't do this forever. But that was awesome. So I want to be clear when we talk about optimization, we're not throwing shade on how you live your life. But this question you lived in, I feel like shit at the end of the day. I don't want to feel like this. I better pivot to optimize for something else,
That definitely resonates. I also want to say no shade either. The thing that makes me think of too is another one of maybe what I would call one of these more true ideas, which is that, right, what is actually important at the end of the day? Something that as an early stage fundraising entrepreneur, I'm applying to a lot of programs, and they always ask you what are your top achievements and your, top accomplishments? Every time I want to answer that question by saying I'm a really good friend. That to me, that's my top achievement. That's one of them. That's one of the most important parts of who I am and what I've done.
Yeah.
Now, I never do answer the question that way. I know that that's not what it means, but it's an example of, here's another cliche phrase, the best things in life are free. The things that are most valuable. Reading a book from a library, okay, the amount of money involved in that transaction is very little. There's nobody is going to make more money off of you spending 6 hours reading that book, right?
Yeah.
It's a more valuable way of spending time than scrolling, on Instagram for 6 hours. So we receive all these messages about what is valued in society. I think the most valuable stuff isn't monetarily quantifiable.
There's another book that you had mentioned, How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. So I want to take what you just said by Jenny Odell. I want to take what you just said and go a little bit further with it and kind of introduce this idea of like, all right, so we have to slow down, we have to tune in order for like the next move to be intentional. Like it's not, that's just, you can't make a left turn if you're, going 200 miles an hour. You will die. How about doing nothing? So you said on your break, did you say radically unplugged? Like,
yeah, it was a thorough unplugging.
Love it. Which sounds like kind of sexy if you think about it. Anyway.
It does.
There's something that just doesn't, speaking of sexy, feel sexy about, and I'm interrogating my own thought process in this. I'm like going to the library and getting a book, unless you post about it. What about doing nothing? How do we make that sexy? You don't have to answer that. But like this idea of doing nothing, why is that controversial? And what's your experience with that?
I think it comes down to how we define nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What
totally.
is doing nothing? Taking a nap is doing something. Taking a walk and looking at trees and maybe using an app to find out what kind of native prairie plant grows in Horner Park. Those are all doing things. It's not doing nothing. It's just that maybe you're not making money or maybe somebody else isn't making money off of the things that you're doing. And that's really the biggest idea in this book, How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy, is to redefine for ourselves what actions seem valuable and worthwhile.
I find this in my work. It's a lot to say what you just said. It's up to you to choose what's valuable, especially when what that requires seems to be really uncomfortable. I mean, you talked about you had this season of feeling awful. And then there was a sense of like, I have to point my light somewhere different. What's your experience with getting through that messy part of the work that has to be done so you know where the value is for you? Rather than wake up, repeat, wake up, repeat. Are you going to say reading?
No, I wasn't going to. Although it doesn't hurt.
Right.
This is probably an idea that I know you'll be familiar with, but it's not like, oh, you figure all this stuff out, chip chop, like you're done. It's a total like work in progress thing that is, I think, just a part of like daily modern life today. I think what maybe gets tricky for folks is a lot of people don't like making choices. They don't like making decisions. They don't like making choices. It's FOMO. It's like loss aversion. It's like, I don't know if this is going to be the right thing. People sometimes avoid it, or just like it's not something that people always like love doing. But I think that there's a other side of the coin where decision making is very empowering. It lets you express like your ultimate autonomy. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't get to tell me like what's important to me. I get to decide. I get to take back control. This phrase, take back control, was used most famously recently to sort of power the Brexit campaign for the leaving the EU side. So what they told people was like, the EU's in control, you, whoever in Yorkshire, take back control by voting to leave the EU. That was a really effective campaign. And I think that's just generally like a really effective message, because there are all these other forces out there who are trying to like take your decision-making power sort of like away from you. And I think that it's empowering and positive to get to decide for yourself.
Also, to be clear, we're not saying you can't be rich and joyful. Go make the money, right?
Look, rich and joyful is my ultimate goal.
Are you kidding me? Here's the thing, though. I want to start with joy and get rich.
Yeah. To be clear, like, it's not like anti making rich, although I will say I am anti getting rich off of actively making the world a worse place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's money to be made. Prosperity is there. Asking for what you want is absolutely the invitation. My point of view, I've made some similar choices in my life, has been like, let me come correct to the venue, the marketplace, right? As like a person who, look, some days are better than others, is like humble and loving. And then let me make some money.
Yeah.
I want to know what you're protesting now. Is there anything at the top of mind of like, where do you want to see change?
Got some discrete local answers, some bigger global answers. One issue that I am locally in Chicago just been learning more about is bike safety and lack thereof. And
Yes.
Actually, Chicago is terrible and has a terrible record when it comes to investing in bike safety, really horrible accidents and deaths. It's like in the bottom of like other comparable big cities with regards to this. And I had an acquaintance who unfortunately passed away like a couple years ago from a bike accident. And so I think that for many reasons, it's an issue that I wish our city of Chicago would take more seriously. In my general day-to-day working on Italic type, one of the things that I'm trying to make readers a much more important part of the conversation when it comes to like the book industry. In the book industry, you know, you have publishers and bookstores and libraries. There's no entity that's really focused specifically on like reader interest first. Publishers want to sell the new books. They don't really want to make the reading experience, you know, like so much better for an individual reader. And so I feel like readers are a group of people who are very passionate consumers who have been really under acknowledged and under invested in the book space, in the consumer technology space, and that there's just a real opportunity to make this hobby, you know, that we all love, that creates like so much value and connection and like new ideas, an even richer part of our lives.
You may or may not know this. Let me share with you. Our listeners are people like us, so women 35 to 50. And then teenagers. Who knew? And so, as you talk about that, I think about them first. I think about the way that Book Talk and every other platform, you know, has a place for people to be really psyched about reading, the experience of the reader, like how you feel. I'm curious when you talk about, and then we can kind of head home with our conversation, but I'm thinking about like, what would you say to teenagers about the value of the experience that they're having and the change that they can affect?
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say is that, you know, not all mediums and formats are created equally. Mm-hmm. When you're reading a book versus like watching TV, for example, or watching a short video, there is more stuff happening in your brain. They did these studies and they saw that when people were reading on a screen, they had more activity in their brain. And so they had assumed that meant that reading digitally and like digital entertainment, this was in the early days of the internet, was like a positive thing. Then they came to find out actually that there's too much happening in your brain, that it leads to cognitive overload. And so it really decreases comprehension and like some of the connective, you know, neural activity that's going on when you're reading. This is true for everyone, you know, including teenagers. The actual, you know, slow process of reading a book really does have some unique and special benefits. And it's a simple pleasure that shouldn't be lost. And I think Book Talk is amazing is just another point that shows that like books aren't going away. It's that all the time it's like, oh, well, books are over, nobody reads anymore. That's not true. It can't just be about getting followers on your book talk channel or like whatever it is. It's about the reading of the book. Not being as wrapped up in, my brand or like, what does that mean externally, but making sure that like we're savoring it for ourselves also.
Beautifully said. By the way, if you don't know, Book Talk is a whole lane on TikTok that if you're lucky enough to get on is pretty enjoyable. We did talk about the obsession with optimization, and I think ultimately the invitation we landed on is like, it's up to you. That's kind of a beautiful thing. It's hard. You're going to resist it. But on the other side of it, joy, fun, right? A little bit more freedom to be you.
I think that was a really lovely summation. And I think you really nailed it.
Well, thank you, friend.
Thank you.
I hope you have an amazing evening. See ya.
Bye.
All right, friends, you know the deal. If you liked this episode, go ahead and click that subscribe button so we can keep introducing you to these incredible people. And if you want more Who's Missing content, check out our IG and TikTok at Who's Missing Podcast. Talk to you next week.